Welcome in to another playoff edition of Daily Faceoff Live, streaming live on the DFO YouTube, and as always, brought to you by Bet365. Download the app and use the promo code NATION, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Happy Victoria Day to all of our listeners in Canada. Happy Monday to everybody in the States. It's not a holiday Monday in the U.S., correct, Frank?
Correct. That's next Monday. I don't know why they don't link up here, particularly when in Canada they call it May 2-4 weekend. Next weekend would be May 2-4 weekend. What are we doing here?
Yeah, that was honestly very confusing. I was about to ask you last week. I was like, hey, are we doing a show on the holiday Monday? And I was like, wait, no, it's only a holiday for half our listeners. Anyways, we have exciting playoff stuff to talk about. So come on, I want to be out here talking hockey. Anyways, we're going to be joined by Matt Larkin in a few minutes. He's going to really take us deep into the Toronto Maple Leafs and what could be coming after another disappointing playoff exit for the Leafs. And I guess we can start there, Frank. Before we do the Leaf stuff, maybe we should, and maybe this isn't being done enough, let's tip our cap to this Florida Panthers team. An absolute blowout victory for them. They are off to their third consecutive Eastern Conference final. And what impresses me the most about the way these two playoff rounds have gone for Florida, Frank, every night it's just a different guy who you point to and go, oh, tonight it was Seth Jones as their best player, and the night before it was a different guy. Like, they are just so deep, so strong, so well polished.
Yeah, they're not phased by any which way you want to play the game. You want to play with speed? Great. Skill? Awesome. Toughness? Sure. We can play that way too. And as the series went on, Sergei Bobrovsky got better and better. You mentioned the depth and different pieces that continue to step up. Full marks to Bill Zito, their general manager, for the moves that he's made. He's been as aggressive as anyone. You add Seth Jones and Brad Marchand in one trade deadline period without really giving up a whole ton of stuff from your roster. Spencer Knight out the door, some draft picks, sure. The Florida Panthers advancing to the Eastern Conference Final, that one pick for Marchand does convert to a first. So a total win for the Boston Bruins on Sunday. They see a big rival go down in the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they also now get a first-round pick as a result. Big winners over the weekend, but look, Florida is, they're going to be an incredibly difficult out for anyone, whether it's the Carolina Hurricanes, who I think is a, really interesting third round matchup, two teams that play a very similar style. But, tell me that the Panthers aren't the favorite right now. I know that's not what the odds would say, but they're going to be in a really good position to go back and repeat again.
Yeah, they are favorites to win this series against the Canes, though, even if they're not number one on the Stanley Cup leaderboard. And you mentioned Bobrovsky. He's probably going to have to continue to be excellent. First three games of that Leaf series, 833, 800, 871. He then went shutout, 969, 882, and 950 to close it out. So three of those four games, the numbers were just off the charts good for the man they call Bob. And again, going up against Freddie Anderson, probably going to be some low-scoring games. But we can save that preview talk for tomorrow when that series will begin. Frank, quickly a word on the Leafs, and I said we're going to get into it really deep with Matt Larkin, but I mean, just the whole no-show of it all last night, if I were talking to a Leafs fan, it's more frustrating than heartbreaking because of that no-show. It's not like they blew it and lost on a bad bounce in OT, and it's like, oh man, they played so good. Like, they did not deserve it.
Yeah, and that was 2 out of the last 3 games of the series, right? Games 5 and 7 on home ice. What's the excuse? I think when you look back now at this decade, 9 years of playoff appearances for the Toronto Maple Leafs and this core of players, it's going to go down as the most disappointing era in team history. All the talent in the world, and it's been something different every time, except the one constant has been that the core doesn't deliver. And you could have made all these different excuses along the way. You could have said, remember when Mike Babcock was there? It was like, hey, they're just happy to be here. And then it was, those COVID years, Montreal, Columbus, losing in those times. They're like, just this is weird. Like, no fans, the bubble. Like, you could come up with whatever excuse you wanted. Then after that, it was a big roster construction thing. Hey, they don't have the depth necessary to compete. Here's the thing, though. Like, you could have made the same judgment about this Leaf team 4 playoff runs ago. If someone tells you who they are, you should believe it. That's just the truth. This Toronto Maple Leafs core is going to go down as one of the most underachieving superstar crop of players that we've ever seen in the league. And that's not even really opinion. It's kind of fact. Like, just look at the numbers. They don't show up when it matters most. And when you have no shows in games 5 and game 7 on home ice, and you continually have poor numbers in game 7s, I don't know how or why anyone would have expected logically anything to be different, because everyone wanted to come up with a narrative all season long about how different this team was. And it's been the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah, I saw someone make the comparison. They're like, hey, look, Ovi only ever went past the second round once. He won a Stanley Cup. And because of that, no one ever talks about him as a guy who didn't come through in the playoffs. But the difference is those runs when it wasn't happening for Washington, you could look at the box numbers and go, oh, Ovi was not the issue because he was out there scoring just as many goals as anyone else in the playoffs. Like, it was never on Ovi, and you could tell that by watching. And this one, as much as you can point to injuries and this, that, the pressure, blah, 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 playing good defensively. No, like, the point is, like, look at the list of game 7 losses here. 3-1, 2-1, 2-1, 6-1. If you score 3 goals in half those games, you're winning them. Like, it's very clear to see what the issue is.
Yeah, and it's the same thing again and again. At what point do you realize that Brendan Shanahan, who doesn't have a contract for next season and beyond as Maple Leafs president, he asked for killer instinct a few years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And I thought it was really interesting that on the bench last night during the TNT broadcast, Jackie Redmond asked Florida Panthers coach Paul Maurice about killer instinct. And he said, I don't really buy into that, because if it was instinctual, you'd always have it with you. And you just have it once and carry it with you all throughout your playoff life. And I think, to me, that was a really interesting way to, he's just not just a great orator, but a great answer to the question, because this Leaf team has never had it. Not once, not never. And I think to expect that they will have it and will carry it with them all the way through is nonsense. They need to change it up.
We're going to keep talking Leafs in a little bit, but let's go out west, Frank, where the Dallas Stars punched their ticket to their 3rd straight Western Conference final. Their 4th in 6 years for the Dallas Stars, and they will once again do battle with the Edmonton Oilers. But go into that series against Winnipeg, it was a Thomas Harley overtime winner. It was a Jake Ottinger sprawling save in the 3rd period that propels them to a victory in Game 6. Is this Dallas team, maybe, are they at all different than the 2 that have lost in the Western Conference finals previously?
Well, they're definitely different than last year, because last year they lost to the Oilers in 5 games because they were trying to get through it with 4 defensemen. This year, they're much healthier. They're much more impactful. They have a significant edge over the Edmonton Oilers in both goaltending. As you mentioned, Ottinger, you could make the case that he was the MVP of round 2. And look at their defense. They've got the 1st and 2nd best defenseman in this series with Miro Heiskanen and Thomas Harley. Harley has been excellent, really, kind of since well before Four Nations. Four Nations Faceoff was just his kind of coming out party. And now you look at this team and they're really well situated. The funny thing about Dallas, and you could say, hey, on paper, maybe the deepest team that's remaining in this tournament, well, their depth scoring hasn't been that great in this Stanley Cup playoffs. That's what's interesting now going up against Edmonton. And so from the Winnipeg perspective, we're left with some real questions. How does this team find a way to win on the road? Is Connor Hellebuyck now over it based on the way that he finished off this series? He went through a stretch to close out the series, making 47 saves on 48 shots. So certainly some questions for Winnipeg. How different will this team be moving forward? My guess would be not very.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that Jets team. I guess we'll start with Connor Hellebuyck, since you see him up on your screen right now. I look at the way he played in Game 6, and on one hand, it's like, hey, he gave the Jets the kind of performance that they need. On the other hand, I go, too little, too late. If Connor Hellebuyck plays that well on the road at any other point earlier in this series, then we might be sitting here previewing a Game 7 tonight, Frank.
You're right. And I mean, ifs and buts. I mean, we could go down the list and try and figure out all the different things so far in the playoffs that could have, would have maybe been different. What happens if the Leafs won an OT, 1 shot away in Game 3 against the Panthers? I mean, you ask yourself those questions to death. In the end, I think Winnipeg, their inconsistency on the road all playoffs long is what crushed them. That part, and Hellebuyck was right at the center of that, with really, really poor performances. Pulled in all 3 road games in St. Louis, then asking ourselves the question before Game 4: should the Winnipeg Jets go to Comrie for one game and one game only before returning home for Game 5? They end up losing that game. He gives up a hat trick. Look, that is the $60 million question for the Jets moving forward. Is Connor Hellebuyck, unbelievable regular season goalie. We're now going back to 2012. I think Jonathan Quick is the last goalie to win a Stanley Cup in a year in which he's played 60 plus games in a regular season. Do we need to have that conversation? There's lots of different things to key in on, because Hellebuyck, Vezina and Hart finalist, and didn't really look good for many stretches, 85% of the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Yeah. Man, you give all the credit in the world to Mark Scheifele, and the emotion was all over this hockey game from pre-game to after the game when he was getting his hugs from his teammates. And he has 9 hits, Frank. He scores the Jets' only goal. For a second there, you're like, man, this is storybook. But then you kind of remember that, sports isn't always storybook. And that shot of him in the penalty box on a, ticky-tack, call it that, tripping call, and their season ends on that note. It's just, you feel for Scheifele, the passing of his father, like, that was tough to watch this at the end.
To be fair, though, not a ticky-tack call. I mean, I understand why he committed the penalty, because you're trying to prevent a breakaway in the dying seconds of the third period in a tied game. So I don't even know that it was necessarily a bad penalty to take. That said, full marks to Mark Scheifele, and just feel for the Scheifele family. So sudden, and his dad, Bob, just the ultimate hockey dad. I can't tell you how many times I'd run into him in a boarding area of a flight or somewhere, just on his way to go see Mark play. And, just the ultimate hockey family. So to see him play through that and then have it be so cruel in the end, Adam Lowry consoling him in the box. I think the handshake from the handshake line with the Dallas Stars told you everything you needed to know about the respect. Here's Jamie Benn, who just basically sucker punched Scheifele the game before, consoling him, saying, hey, we're all thinking of you. That's the best of hockey on display in one handshake line for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, and again, condolences to the Scheifele family on the passing of Brad over the weekend. Let's move along, Frank. We're going to get back into the playoff talk with Larkin in a second. But our offseason preview today is the Philadelphia Flyers, and it's a team we obviously talked about a lot last week, making the big splash, hiring Rick Tocchet to be their next head coach and giving him that big 5-year contract. But now it's time for them to spend on this roster, I think. $24 million in cap space, and that's with 10 forwards, 7 defensemen, and 2 goalies on the roster. Frank, they have a surplus of cash. They have a surplus of assets. If Danny Briere wants to get aggressive, this might be the summer to do it.
And I think they will be, because they were recently just scouting at the U18s, and we've had Stephen Ellis on so many times to talk about how special the 2026 draft class is already shaping up to be. And the Flyers are thinking, well, we really don't want to be in the lottery situation again. I could make the argument for a team that's struggling to find difference makers that's exactly the year that you want to be in the lottery, because you're guaranteed pretty much to get a special player if you're picking anywhere from 1 to 4, and not just for the shot at Gavin McKenna. But look at this draft board here. You've got 7 picks essentially in the first 70, give or take, maybe even less than that. So you're looking at this and you're going, hey, how do we find a way to leverage these assets? And how do we also leverage our coaching hire, which is exactly what they're trying to do. And they've made a very clear point in this press conference last week and sharing Rick Tocchet with the media, which was to say, we hope that he helps us in recruiting players, because they are ready, they believe, to take a step forward. They want to take a step forward. I would argue without some clear positional boxes checked for the Flyers moving forward, no franchise goalie, no franchise defenseman, no franchise center, that's going to be really difficult to do. Any coach can only be as good as the players that he has in front of him. I think the Flyers have their work cut out for them and a lot of work to do. Let's see what they can chip off this summer.
Yeah, and again, all the flexibility in the world. It should be a really interesting one in Philly, and the draw of, like you said, having Rick Tocchet there. I think there are players who want to play for a guy like that and play in a market like Philly, so could be really intriguing. Let's move along. Let's get to our big segment for the day. It's the All 32, and it's brought to you by Budweiser. Budweiser is encouraging buds to make time for playoffs, not excuses. Every goal, every win is better enjoyed with your bud. So phone a bud, text a bud, and call out their excuses for bailing on the playoffs. After all, the playoffs are the most wonderful time of the year, so make them count. When it's springtime, it's go time with Budweiser. Always a pleasure to welcome Matt Larkin to the show, our managing editor here at Daily Faceoff. And Larkin, we're going to dig into this Panthers-Leafs series and the Leafs exit from the playoffs. Can I start, though, with some of the quotes that have been going around, whether it's Brad Marchand or Matt Tkachuk, the weird, pity quotes coming from the Panthers towards the Maple Leafs? What do you make of this whole notion that seems to be getting sent out of, oh, man, it's tough to play in that market?
It's funny, as I watch guys like Brad Marchand in particular talking, I'm looking to see if there's a little smirk forming at the corner of his mouth. It almost feels like gamesmanship because Brad Marchand, the Leaf killer in Game 7s, you got the Leafs right where you want them. You don't want them to change if you can get past these guys every year. And I think you want to continue the culture of coddling these players, which is sort of what's gotten them into this position in the first place. Is there a little bit of sympathy for the pressure in the market? Maybe, but I don't really buy it. It's not like Toronto is the only pressure cooker market in the NHL. Edmonton, they don't have as many major sports out there for you guys. There's plenty of pressure, I would argue, on the Oilers. It's not like you have the Raptors and Blue Jays to take the heat off, and they can still get to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals. So I don't really know what the sentiment is supposed to be. I'm done believing in it. I don't think it's correct. And I do wonder if there's a bit of gamesmanship going on there.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't buy it for 1 second. I think it's complete nonsense. I mean, these are the most well taken care of, pampered athletes who are highly paid, who have all the support in the world from maybe the biggest fan base in volume, unquestionably the biggest fan base in volume across the league. Like, why would anyone think that this is such a difficult place to play? All the media. I mean, Matt, you're in there every day or a few times a week. Who's the hard edge media guy who's going in there and bruising these guys and bloodying them every time he enters the locker room? I just don't see it.
Yeah, I think you're right. And to sort of go inside baseball for a second, I think the Leafs are one of the most protective teams in the NHL in terms of controlling what is said, how many players are available after games. They do a really good job keeping those players safe. So I agree. It's not like they're subjected to this endless rush of reporters every single day. And the thing is, we're talking about pressure. We're in round 2. The Leafs won 7 playoff games. That's the first time they've done that in 23 years. That's not even halfway to the Stanley Cup. It's not like you're in Game 7 and you're gripping the Stanley Cup final. You're gripping the stick so tightly the pressure is too much. It's round 2. How bad can the pressure be this early in the postseason relative to what other players are going through league-wide?
It's crazy. You're right. So priority number 1 for the Toronto Maple Leafs for you this offseason?
I think it's actually to find a puck-moving defenseman. It is not Morgan Rielly anymore. And if you look at the repeated problems of the Leafs being hemmed into their own zone against Ottawa too, not just Florida, they could not clear the zone. Yes, they were blocking a lot of shots because they didn't have the puck. They had so much trouble clearing the zone. They have great shot blockers. They have great physicality on the blue line, but they no longer have that number 1 horse who's a great skater and can take the puck out of trouble with the puck on his stick, or take it out, exit the zone with the puck on his stick. It used to be Morgan Rielly, but I think we saw in this series, he's really slowed down. Maybe we're going to find out he's been dealing with some kind of injury as well. There's always that, but he's not the same player he was even a couple of years ago. And it's difficult because if you look at the free agent market, it's guys like Ivan Provorov, Vladislav Gavrikov. There isn't really that true perfect puck mover available in free agency. If you're going to find one, it's got to be the trade market, whether it's going to be a Noah Dobson you try to kick the tires on, whether you try to seek something crazy like Erasmus Dahlin. The Leafs need their version of Miro Heiskanen or Quinn Hughes, Cale Makar. Those guys do not grow on trees, but I think it's the number 1 thing they were missing in these playoffs.
Well, okay, so it's interesting you said that because I agree definitely in nature of that is a need for sure, but is the need not to just you need dogs, like to quote Nazem Kadri, you need guys that are in the fight with you. You need guys that can help get you over the finish line when you get to tough situations like this. Don't you just need a Sam Bennett?
Maybe, but I mean, they have dogs. They have Matthew Nyes. They have Simon Benoit was really tough. Chris Tanev led the league in hits taken. I think they got tougher. Brandon Carlo, Scott Lawton, they dogified
I
this
don't mean
team. They were the
clutch.
biggest team in the
I don't mean
NHL.
tough. I mean clutch.
Yeah. And I do think that is the crux of the question for the offseason to me. So you could consider bringing back Mitch Marner just on the grounds that there's no player of his talent level available now that Mikko Rantanen's gone, right, off the market. And you could say, okay, maybe it's more important to be consistently competitive. If you're willing to think short term, you could take that money, that $14 million, you throw it at Sam Bennett and Brad Marchand. Then you get your two dogs, your guys who can play a heavy game with skill, have clutch experience. And you have to understand, if you're the Leafs in that scenario, you're definitely sacrificing sustained success in that case, but maybe it's worth it. I mean, you've done your sustained success. You've had 9 years of being competitive, 100-point seasons, and you can't just keep doing the same thing over and over.
Frank said Brendan Shanahan heading into a year where he doesn't have a contract. What do you think? Are there going to be changes way up at the top potentially?
Well, I suspect there will be. If you look at the way Keith Pelly, the CEO of MLSE, spoke when he made his big address last year, it seems like there's supposedly a zero tolerance for anything less than a deep playoff run. Shanahan, of course, the contract is over anyway. We don't even know if he wants to come back after being a decade in this pressure cooker. And, Shanahan did do a lot of good things for the franchise. I think he brought them back to relevance. He did a lot of small touches, even things like changing honored numbers to retired numbers. I think he made the Leafs less of a laughingstock as a franchise. But at the same time, he, I think, also was part of the brain trust that coddled these stars and gave them so many more chances than a lot of other franchises would. And I think you just eventually have to let him fall on the sword here, because you cannot do this over and over and not be able to break through even to the third round of the playoffs. I think it's embarrassing in a sense that this is considered such a mountain to climb when you have so many other franchises that seem to do it every year relatively easily. It's not that big a deal to make the conference final. We're not talking about Stanley Cup final. We're just talking about the third round of the playoffs.
Yeah, I guess last one for you. What do you think, John? What do you think happens with John Tavares this summer? I mean, he's coming off a great season. Like, the idea that he'd come back for a discount, not all that far-fetched, but how much of a discount would he be willing to take, I guess?
Yeah, it's really complicated because Tavares actually had a really good year, right? He had, I think, 38 goals. He was one of the best net front players in the league in the second half, especially after the Four Nations faceoff. So he kind of played his way past the true sweetheart team-friendly deal. If you want to keep him, even paying him $7 million, if you give him the Joe Pavelski contract, 3 times 7, that's still a discount relative to what he did production-wise this season. And to me, it's just the way that Toronto went out, I think, maybe has to change things. Because even if you asked me a week ago, I'd say, hey, Tavares has earned his right to come back. And if you're getting him on a discount, he's still a really good second line center. He has plenty left in the tank. But when this core group no-shows the way they did, outscored 12-2 in their own barn, game 5 and 7. I tweeted this last night, guys. If the San Jose Sharks, if you just said, hey, guys, we want you to play the Florida Panthers twice in a row in your home barn in these playoffs, would they have lost by a 12-2 score? I don't think they would have. And you have to pin a little bit of that on the Leafs core leadership group. And just because of the nature of this loss, maybe you have to just wipe the slate completely clean, and that could include Tavares.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting summer in Toronto. Matt Larkin, managing editor, senior writer with us at Daily Faceoff. Thanks for doing this on a holiday Monday, Matt.
Thanks, guys.
Frank, our hashtag askdfo inbox question. Let me throw you one about the Leafs in there. I lost the name of the commenter, but it was basically a question of, do you think Tree Living considers a Austin Matthews trade this summer?
Look, I think they've arrived at this point in time where anything should be on the table. And for me, it's not just with Austin Matthews, the poor playoff success and the lack of commitment to compete and grind. 26 playoff goals in 68 career games. 3 of those games were 2-goal games. So he scored 23 times in 23 of the 65 games that he's played in. 23 of the 68. I'm getting it wrong. That's an impossibly low number for a guy that's a 0.65 goals per game scorer in his career. I mean, north of 400 goals for his career now, and to be at this point where, you continually fall short in the playoffs, that's tough. But here's the other reason that I would say that it merits at least some thought, exercise, or discussion in the Toronto Maple Leafs front office, which is the chronic injuries. If this is truly, and we've been scant on details, but if this truly is a back injury, how many of those lower back injuries ever actually get better? These guys aren't 19 anymore. They're not 23 anymore. They're not 24. They're getting older, and I think it's a question. I think it's very unlikely that it happens, but I think to engage in the question and the thorough analysis of this team, I think it's one that you have to at least ask the question about. Even I think it's 99% chance, 98% chance that he's back.
Yeah, I definitely get what you're saying. That should be that everything's on the table this summer and nobody is safe. And after a loss or losses like you had in games 5 and 7, quite frankly, no one should feel safe in Toronto. Let's get to our bets for Bet365. Want to get in on the action for the Stanley Cup playoffs at Bet365? They got you. Game props, player props, totals, money line, futures like series winners, the Stanley Cup champion, even the Conn Smythe Trophy winner. Whatever your bet, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Download the app and get in on the game. An official partner of the Stanley Cup playoffs, must be 19 or older. 2 little parlays here for the series coming up. Over 5.5 games in each of them comes out to plus 125. So you're getting a touch more than positive money on each of these series to go 6 or 7 games, which I really don't mind. And then over in the Dallas-Edmonton series, Leon Draisaitl to score 3+ goals, Mikko Rantanen to score 3+ goals. Listen, both these guys are capable of ripping off hat tricks. So to get them over 2.5 goals played together at plus 170, I think the Stars, no pun intended, I suppose, will be out and productive in the Western Conference Final like they all were last year. I know Rantanen wasn't there, but it was a lot of Connor, Leon, the big guns from Dallas as well, and Rupe Hintz.
Yeah, we talked about on the rundown this morning. What did you say Jacob Slavin's Conn Smythe odds were? Did you say 60 to 1?
6,000. Yeah, 60 to 1.
Yeah. Look, I can't wager on Conn Smythe as a voter, but I think that's a crazy number. I think he's been that valuable to that team to this point. Freddie Anderson's been great as well, obviously, but there's a big reason why Anderson has the numbers that he does. When it comes to that, like maybe you sprinkle a couple bucks on that if you think the Canes can win this series and get to game 1 of the Stanley Cup final, might get a pretty decent cash out offer. I don't know. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, it's a decent strategy. Also with Jacob Slavin, I know he's 31 years old, but that extension, $6.39 million, that is criminally low. It kicks in next season. It hasn't even kicked in yet.
I know. It's incredible. Incredible work by a team that knew that they had a player that didn't want to play anywhere else.
Yeah. All right, Frank, to wrap things up, again, a lot of attention paid to the Scheifele family and the passing of Brad, but I wanted to give some stick taps to all the Dallas Stars fans who, I mean, it wasn't like someone led the push on this. It was very organic. They all started donating $55 to a bunch of different charities in the name of Brad Scheifele. So, again, a lot of credit to those Dallas fans who came together, raised over $30,000 as well. Frank, the number 55 thing, it was really, really well done.
I just think it speaks to the best of hockey. I mean, there was certainly some reporting going on over the weekend as well that Stars owner Tom Ghilardi chartered his jet to get Mark Scheifele back home to Kitchener the day after the loss. You say it for a reason that, hockey people are some of the best people in the world, and you see them all come together in moments like this, reminded time and time again why that's true.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it reminds me of even last season when the Oilers eliminated the Stars. I think Stars fans raised north of $10,000 for the Ben Stelter Foundation as their way of doing the, call it, handshake line between fans. So again, really, really classy fan base down in Dallas. I was down there for the Western Conference Final last year, and they really are all super, super nice. It was a very enjoyable building to be in. So that is a wrap on today's edition of the show. Frank, tomorrow, the Eastern Conference Final kicks off. We'll get to that and more. See us right back here tomorrow, noon Eastern. What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content. From daily live shows with Frank Seravalli to analysis from former NHLers to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.